Hello everyone, this is an impromptu live. I wasn't planning on it, but I was going to sit down and finish working on this piece. And I figured I might as well show you how I do it, since there's been a lot of interest around painting with distress ink reinkers, which is what I mainly use for my watercolors. So I figured since I was going to continue doing this, that I might as well show you how I paint with Distress Ink reinkers. Again, this is an unplanned live. I was just going to sit down and do this, but I didn't record a process video of how much I've done this far. So I figured I'd just show you live how I painted. So this is a stamp that I designed, and I illustrated this for a dear friend for her birthday. Her name is Bindu, and she is the owner of Crafty Meraki. So as soon as she saw this sketch, she was like, I need to turn this into a stamp. And I said, well, I didn't intend for it to become a stamp. I just illustrated this and colored it and sent it to you as a birthday card. And she was like, well, figure it out, because I need this as a stamp. So I sent her the digital version, and she, of course, turned it into a stamp, which was released this morning. So this stamp is now available at Crafty Meraki, and the designers on her design team, both the resident designers and the guest designers, have done an amazing job. There are so many variations of this stamp. They've been illustrated, colored beautifully. This illustration has been colored beautifully by so many of them. I'm just blown away. I didn't do anything fancy. I'm just doing something very simple, but I did want to try to do the same colors on two different versions of this, which is a no-line coloring and a regular stamping. So this one was stamped with ink on 3, and you can see that there's no lines visible on the edges. Whatever lines are there are from the paint. There's nothing that's really visible in terms of lines. And this one here, this version, was stamped with Ranger Archival. I used the espresso brown, or I think it's called coffee espresso, something like that. It's a dark brown, not black. And you can see I kind of messed up my stamping here. I didn't use my stamping platform. I just used an acrylic block, and I messed it up over here, but I'm hoping that by the time I'm done with the coloring on this, that will not show up. This is what ink on 3 looks like when you stamp it. Again, I didn't stamp it properly, so I didn't want to waste the paper. This is expensive watercolor paper, so I didn't want to waste it, so I just stamped over it with the archival ink, but that works. And then here's another attempt at stamping. I don't know if you can see, it's very faint. This is how ink on 3 stamps, and it's very, very faint after a couple of days. This has been sitting for 2 days. I started this painting, this one, 2 days ago. I've been going at it sporadically. Overall, so far, I've spent 2 hours on this one. This one, I have spent so far about maybe 30 minutes. So how I paint with Distress Ink reinkers, this is my palette. And what I do is I just drop a single drop of paint directly from my Distress Ink reinkers. So I have all my reinkers lined up, and I just take whichever reinker I'm about to use. Say, for example, I was using the picked raspberry. I would just take my picked raspberry. This is my picked raspberry well, and I would just drop it in, just one single drop. And really, this is going to last for a very long time. You take one drop, and it just lasts forever. And then what I would do is I would take this picked raspberry. I'll put it over to the side here so you can see. And I'll just take, I use Princeton brushes. These are Princeton Neptune brushes. I have a rag. I obviously use this quite a lot. And I will just dip my brush in, make sure it's well saturated with water. And then what I do is I paint with water first. So I'll just go in here to this petal. And this is just plain old water, right? This is a size, I think it's 2. Yeah, it's a size 2 Princeton Neptune brush. So I just paint with water first. So this is the petal I want to paint. And I would do the same technique no matter whether it's a no line or a regular stamped image. And I would just take, let me see if I can get this in. If I will just take a little bit, just on the tip of my brush, a little bit of that ink. And just kind of, you see how it spreads? Because there's already water on that petal, so it just spreads. And then I don't want to use the rest of the ink on this tip of the brush, so I just wipe it off, and then I dip my brush again in water, clean it, And I will take some more water. This is just plain water this time. And I will go from the tip with water. And you don't want it to puddle, but you just want enough to help spread the ink. And you don't want it to come all the way to the tip. So I'll move this closer so you can see what just happened. And this is the basic technique I use for all of my paintings. So what happened here, this is the close-up. So what happened here was this was wet, and then I dropped a little bit of ink right here. Then I went in with water. So you have a sweet spot or the highlight area over here, and that's your darkest. And that's how I will continue doing the first layer. And you can see this one, this is almost all done. This is 4 layers deep right now. This is 2 layers. This is 1 layer. So I do about 3 to 4 layers per petal before I call it done. This one, I think it's very close to done. I think I will just use color pencils on this. But this is my first layer on this. I did pink and then I went in with purple. This was my second layer with purple. So I do undertones with a lighter color and then I go in with deeper colors. So here, I'll show you, let me just do this flower and then I'll show you what I do with color pencils to finish up things, because this is in so many different stages right now that I can actually show you how it all comes together at the end. So again, just painting with clear water. One important thing to remember is when you're doing any kind of watercolor painting, your water should not be dirty, because once your water starts getting dirty, it will get that tint. I didn't have that much ink on this, so I need a little bit more. It will get that tint and it will affect the purity of your colors. You don't want that. So remember to switch out your water often when you're doing watercolor painting. And it's a nice, way to take a break, just walk around, get some exercise, move your neck and shoulders. So you see, it's just water and then a little bit of that ink. You don't need a lot. And then just go back in with water and blend the two. I see Nas is here. And I see Sylvan66 saying very pretty. Thank you. And I see a couple of people saying, wow, that's beautiful. Thank you so much. It's coming along. I'm trying to do justice to my illustration. I'm just so stoked it was turned into a stamp. I get goosebumps every time I see somebody just working on these illustrations that are now stamps that are in the hands of all of these people, these talented artists who are doing amazing things with an illustration that was just going to be in my journal, or, in this case, it was just a birthday card for someone. So I am so grateful to Bindu from Crafty Meraki for turning this into a stamp. It's really a joy when people can have access to these images and make something so unique out of them that I hadn't even dreamed up. It's really, really an honor and a privilege and a blessing to see that. So as you can see, it's just this first layer is very, very simple. It's just, water, a little bit of paint, and you just kind of keep going. You don't need a very thin brush. This is my number 2 brush. I'm not doing any detail work. I'm just kind of introducing color into a blank area. And one thing to keep in mind when you're doing petals that are right next to each other, just don't do adjoining petals if you know for sure that you have a lot of water still there. If it's damp, it's fine, but if it's really, really wet, just skip a petal and then go on to the next petal. Otherwise, your colors are going to encroach upon the areas that you want to leave white or light, the sweet spots. You want to preserve your sweet spots, because in watercolor, once you go dark, there's no turning back. If your highlight areas become dark, you can lift, like in some cases, in this case, for example, in this petal, you can lift the color off with a thirsty brush after, but it's not going to give you the same effect as when you're being careful about leaving the white spots, because then they really are white. Here, as much color as I wanted lifted off, it will not turn white. It'll just become a lighter shade of whatever color is on there. So that's just something to keep in mind and be aware of. It's not like an impossible task to make areas that have gone dark lighter with watercolors. You can always use white gouache also, but my preference is to just be careful at this stage and not get the light areas too dark. So just preserve the tips. Like in this petal, the tip didn't get preserved. And if you get water out of your of the area in which you were painting, that's totally fine. I just wipe it off with my finger. You can use a paper napkin or your rag. So this one is pretty much done. And again, you can see it, like this is taking what, about maybe 4 minutes with me talking. So the size of the petal, if it's smaller, it'll take you longer. If it's bigger, it'll take you actually less time to do your initial layers. So this petal is done. Yes, Priya, I will post this video. It will be on my feed, so you can watch it later. I didn't plan this live, so I know a lot of people are going to catch this later, so don't worry about it. Okay, so that's pretty much, I'll do a leaf also to show you how I do the leaves. Again, very, very basic. I'm just dipping my brush in water and I'm going into the middle of this one right here, and I'll just pick up some yellow. So what I do for my greens, I usually don't use a pure green. What I do for my greens is I will take a yellow. So this is wild honey. And you can see I'm mixing my colors on this side. So I just take like a yellow and I'll take a blue. I think this is Salty Ocean. And what this does is it just gives me variations of green, because leaves are not a pure green. They are like all these different shades. And so I can keep adding. I can get some more like yellow in this. I can add some more blue and just spread it with some water right here. And you get some nice variations. It's, you know, don't try too hard. That's the thing. People try too hard. Too hard to get things perfect. Nature's really perfect in its own imperfections, and that is really what you're going for. So your first layers will be done like this, and then the second layer will be the same way. Like this is almost dry. This is a very, very small flower, so I'll show you the second layer. The second layer is going to be with a purple. Let me try to put my palette here so you can see the actual, how much color I get. So I'm just taking some purple directly from here. This is just one drop of purple in my palette. And I'm just going to go closest to the center and just introduce some purple there. And then I'll introduce some purple here. I'm skipping some petals. I'm not doing petals that are right next to each other. And that's because I don't want them blending in. And then I'm just going in with some water and just spreading that. So you see how it has undertones of pink that are preserved from the first layer. And then the flower itself is going to be this beautiful shade of purple. It's just so simple. It really is. There's nothing too complicated about it. I think people just end up overcomplicating it by overthinking, and then the fear becomes so much that they don't even try it. So I'm here to tell you it's just paper and paint. And what's the worst that can happen? It's not going to look as beautiful as you pictured it in your mind's eye. It's not going to look as beautiful as somebody else's painting, but you will have overcome a fear, you will have tried something new, and you will have made something that is unique to you. So I really encourage you to not get so bogged down by perfection and the idea of making something look perfect that you don't even try to do this. It's really simple. And if you want more encouragement or you want one-on-one help with any of these watercoloring techniques I use, just send me a DM. We can schedule something on Zoom. We can paint together. I'm more than happy to show you my tips and tricks. But so I'm going to leave this be because I'm going to mess it up. It's too wet right now. I'm just going to leave this one be. What I usually do is, if it's a half painted flower and it's quite wet and I don't want to ruin it by going into all those little areas right in those adjoining petals, I move on to a flower that will use similar colors. There are many in this bunch that can be colored in similar colors or the same colors. So you have opportunities to move, to skip around while that one dries, and then you come back to it and you do your third layer of darker color, right? So essentially that is the process, no matter how you stamp the image. When I was coloring this, honest to God, I was furious with myself because this has so many details. And I was like, why did I sketch something that has so many details. It's a pain to color, but really that was my mindset at that time. It's really an enjoyable image. I mean, you can just stamp this and just gold emboss it or something, which people have done, and put it on a colorful background, and that'll be fine too. But if you want to color, if you want to watercolor, or if you want to do pencil coloring, I think this stamp would be great for pencil coloring too. It really is a joy to bring in all the variations. Okay, so now I'm going in with my color pencils because this one is almost done. So this is my final stage usually after I finish my watercoloring and I've introduced whatever shadows. I'm just going to do it for this flower because these other ones are not done yet. These are just 2 layers deep. They need one more layer before I will do color pencil work on these. This one I believe is 4 layers right now. And I think it's very close to completion. So this is the one that I will do my color pencil shading. The color pencil shading is basically to deepen some of the darker areas, and that what that does is it lifts up your lighter areas, and so you get more dimension. Also, I need some shadows here where the flowers are hanging over the vase so as to create that illusion of depth. Now, when Crafty Meraki turned this stamp, this illustration into a stamp, Bindu also came out with a die. So this has a matching die, which I don't have, but you can get it from Crafty Meraki when you buy the stamp. And what that die does is it just cuts out the flower bouquet. It doesn't cut out the vase. So you can easily add dimension, which I'm going to add with color pencils for the shadow. You can easily add dimension by die cutting this piece out and putting some foam under it or some paper strips to elevate just the flowers, and then stick it on top of the vase. So it will already have depth in it, and there will be an inbuilt, so to speak, shadow. So for shadow areas, if you have a red, you would gravitate towards using your darkest red or a maroon, right? And I usually just kind of go like this. I just put these are my Polychromos pencils from Faber-Castell, and I love using these. You have to have a very sharp point, a very sharp tip. These bags, by the way, were designed by Kathy Rakusin in collaboration with Christina Werner, who goes by Star of May on Instagram. That's her calligraphy. And these tips are from Kathy, coloring tips are from Kathy, which is really nice to be able to keep referring to these tips. And I don't know if any of you are taking part in the 30-day color challenge. She now has a mini version of it called the 10-day color challenge. And it's really fun to see what people are coloring. So I have my 3 colors here, the darkest ones that I think would go well with this color of the flower. And then I do, so this is, you can see, this is a red violet, a walnut brown, and a burnt carmine. But I will also go for a blue or a purple. Sometimes I will use a black. I mostly don't, but I do like a deep indigo or a dark purple to go with my reds and my browns. Now this one is a blue, and my indigo is the one that usually gets lost because I use it so much, and I then mix it up with my Derwent Inktense pencils, which I'm pretty sure that's where it is right now because I'm not able to find it, but I will use this purple instead because I think this will work. This one is actually a Delft blue. Well, let me just show you, instead of spending time looking for my color, let me just show you what I mean to do with it. This is a black. I don't want a black. I want something that looks very much like a black, which is a deep indigo, but I don't necessarily want a black. I think this purple might be a better color. This is a mauve. Okay, so I have my 4 color pencils here. Now, I like to use this sharpener. It's the AFMAT sharpener. And you can use the dial to figure out how much of a sharpened tip you want. This is the blunt side. This is the sharp, pointy, long tip side. I always have this dial on this side. So like this one, this kind of a tip is not going to work for this. So we need to make it absolutely needle thin, as thin as we can. And you just rotate this and you can hear it sharpening. And then you just pull it out and you got a perfectly fine tip. You see the difference? That'll help you get into those nooks and crannies. So, oops, I dropped some shavings. Okay. Actually, a lot of shavings. See, this is what happens when I don't plan my lives. And I do random stuff like this. Now I'll get all of these marks, which I will now need to use an eraser. That's fine. Okay, so we'll take the red violet, and I'm gonna see if I can zoom in even further and see what that does, if you can get a more clear view of what I'm about to show you. Okay, let's see. So all I'm going to do is go into this darkest part here. This is the shadow cast by this petal onto this petal. It's already pretty dark. I use crackling campfire. I love that distressing color because as you color with it, you can see here, this is the first layer. As you color with it and you spread your brush out flat, I use this, and sorry I'm all over the place. I'm talking about color pencils, but also talking about crackling campfire. But I use this brush here. This is a size 4. And so when I painted, what I did was I spread the brush out. And as I was spreading it out, the crackling campfire goes from this beautiful red. You spread it out, it starts becoming yellow as you spread out the color. It's just gorgeous. That's exactly what happened in these petals here. So that's the color I use, crackling campfire. And I'm just going to go in and I'm just flicking to deepen this color over here. And you know, when you see videos of artists doing something like this, when they're finishing up their paintings, you're like, wait, that didn't really do anything. It's not visible on the camera as much as it is to the naked eye. Our eye perceives colors so much sharper and so much better than the camera can pick it up, unless it's a close-up. So you don't really feel like it made a difference, but it does. In the final image, it really, really does. So all I did was darken this with 2 colors, walnut brown and red violet. And it's basically just going to sharpen that color and those edges along where the petals are overlaid with each other. And you saw, so over here I was flicking. The other thing you can do is go in small circles. So there's 2 different ways of doing it. Whatever you prefer, whatever comes easy to you. There's no method. At least I don't follow a method of doing it. I just kind of whatever comes to me at that point in time, that's the method I follow. Now I'm going to go in with this mauve over here just for some variation. As the light hits these petals, you see all these different colors just as you would in nature. So don't restrict yourself to just one color or one way of doing it. Experiment and see what works. And you know, I said I spent 2 hours on this, and so there's a real fear, you know, you've spent so much time coloring something that you're afraid, you don't want to ruin it. That's completely understandable. But I will encourage you to not think of your paintings when you're trying out new things as being ruined. I encourage you to think of them as moments of learning, because unless you try out something, unless you ask yourself, what if I do this? Unless you follow through with that thought, you'll never know. You'll just be worried about ruining something. But what if you did it and it resulted in something spectacular? Think about that. I mean, you're going to miss out on that opportunity, right? And that's how I kind of do my thing. It's a lot of what ifs and following through with those what ifs. I'm done with being restricted by my fear. I'm afraid of ruining things, of course. Spend 2 hours on something, you don't want to mess it up, but I do it afraid. And if it doesn't turn out the way I imagined it would, it's still okay, you know. I will probably not repeat that mistake the next time I do it. And again, I'm calling it a mistake, but it really was something that I may have learned that was completely new to me that I hadn't tried before. So I really want to encourage you to think about giving yourself the permission and giving yourself the freedom to try out new techniques and new mediums and new, substrates. Try something that nobody's ever tried before and trademark it. just have fun. I want art to be fun for folks, and I see so many folks stressing out and not really enjoying the process because they're worried about how it'll look or if they're doing the right thing. What if they do something wrong? Art is supposed to be a stress buster. It's not supposed to induce stress in you. It's supposed to free you of stress. It's supposed to take you on a journey that soothes you, calms you, invigorates you, you know, all of those things. So you can see it's coming together in terms of all of those dark areas. And because I'm darkening and deepening these shadows, the lighter, the highlight areas feel more pronounced. They feel more alive. So again, I'm just using these 3 colors, not in any particular order in each petal. So each petal has, I really honestly, as I was talking, I don't remember if I did my mauve before I did my brown, before I did my red. I really don't. I mean, I was just kind of going in instinctively, just doing whatever. And that's what I want to encourage you to do. Don't overthink it. Just don't. It's not worth it. Just enjoy the process. You are doing art for you. And, you know, if that painting gets ruined, and I wish I could use air quotes right now, it will still be a work of art. It will still be a part of you. It'll still be something you created with your heart. And that is what matters. It's doing it with your heart is what matters. It's enjoying it is what matters. I can help in terms of telling you, you don't need a lot of ink. You should put water first. You can go in and add some depth and dimension with color pencils. But ultimately, you have to listen to what your heart says and follow that. And when you listen to your heart and you create with your heart, your hands follow. It's just, you know, it's really as simple as that. There is no science to it. So I'm just kind of going in here again, willy-nilly, just adding some depth. And you can see instantly how that has some depth to it with just some wiggly marks done with the brown, the mauve, and the red. And again, it's, you know, there's no specific method to it. You're just leaving one highlight area be, and you're just deepening the shadow areas. And again, for me, the way I'm perceiving this flower, the darker areas are mostly around here, and then these I will probably not touch up too much. This already has a lot of red, so I'm just going to go in with a cooler shade with my purple over here to intensify the shadow of that petal resting on top. And again, just either flicks or small circles, that's all you need. And up here is a lighter area. And the other thing you do want to remember, not, again, as I said, preserve your highlights. Like when I was doing this one, preserve your highlights as much as you can, even when you're adding your shadows with your color pencil. So don't overdo it with pencils. Remember, your pencils are just accenting or accentuating your darker areas and making it more three-dimensional, if you will. But the real deal is the watercolor. That foundation has already been laid. So again, just using all of these. And then for the shadows over here around these areas, I do want to finish up these leaves. These leaves are not done yet, but the shadow, I'll show you how the shadow around these areas would work. I would just basically go in with my, whatever color I have. This is a mauve. And then just kind of select one side and put my shadow on that one side for everything that is overhanging on this vase here. And again, I did not anticipate this illustration becoming a stamp. If I had seriously thought about it, I would have modified this illustration to not have these many tiny details. Although I don't know, maybe you guys like having a lot of tiny details to paint. But for me, this was going to be a one-off thing. I had just made this illustration for a birthday card with no intentions of it turning into a stamp. So somebody feels overwhelmed by this stamp, I'm sorry. Just know that you can. I'll finish this up, and I will share this on my feed. I will also leave this video be on my feed in case there's anything that you found helpful. But I will basically be doing the same technique where I do the third layer on these flowers, and then I go in with a color pencil and just add the final touches. And then with this one, I will finish it off. I'm still doing the first layer here, and I'm basically trying to compare what a no-line colored image looks like vis-a-vis right next to a regular stamped image with the same colors. And I think the difference is going to be quite stark because I can already see how it's coming together differently. So anyway, this was an impromptu live, and I hope that you got something from it as far as coloring tips go. If not, at least you got something in terms of encouragement for trying out things that are new and scary and not overthinking it. I will see you all later. Thank you so much for joining me.